Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. In this episode, we're going to be taking bland video footage that looks like this and transforming it to look like this. The color grading that we're going to be going over is not just global adjustments, but I'm going to show you how to add effects that is specific to maybe your subject or your background. Now, if your subject moves and that change needs to follow your subject, don't worry, I got you covered. I will show you how to go ahead and track your subject. We are now purchasing more and more cameras that have the capability of shooting incredible video footage. And because of that, we are now incorporating more video footage paired with our photography to tell a compelling story. So with that, let's get started. If you are new to this channel, my name is Shannon and I am a full-time photographer in beautiful British Columbia. Whether you're here to learn, be inspired, or simply enjoy some stunning visuals, you've come to the right place. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like this. Hi everyone, here on Premiere Pro is where we're going to get started. If you're not using Premiere Pro but another program, that's okay. I think a lot of these tips and techniques are going to be able to be used on different platforms. But if you are new to using any of these programs, I will briefly kind of go over my breakdown of how I have it set up. But then we're going to jump right into the sort of meat and potatoes of this video. So this is what you open with. You can type in your names and where you're going to save your file to. My project I named up here, it says Wildlife Adventure Example. And here in this left-hand panel, this is where I would import all my media. I can either click import or I can just drag and drop. So before I start doing that, I usually create folders, or in Premiere Pro they call it bins. So I'll do one for Nikon Z9. So all my footage from my Nikon camera. I've got a Sony camera, so I'll put Sony. I'll have one for photography. Then there'll be one for music, effects, all of that. So once I have those sort of laid out, I'll then open each bin or each folder, and then I'll drag and drop my content into there. Now, once I have the videos placed, that's when I drag and drop them into this bottom panel, which is the timeline. Now, on the right-hand side, we have our sound, our effects, color, and then we have graphics. Now there are more features that you can add to this screen. If you go up to window, there's a lot of other features that you can kind of drag and drop. So we can have one for markers, we can have scopes in here, so it'll just open up a new panel. And it can be a separate panel, or you can kind of just drag it and place it up amongst all the other ones. So here we have all the different panels. So that's sort of the layout, and this is how it looks at the very beginning. Okay, so I have some sample videos here that we're going to work on. I've got two clips here, and they're both raw clips. The one on the bottom I'm not going to touch. The one on the top is where we're going to do some color grading, and you'll be able to see the difference between the two. If we go over to our right panel here, I've got one of the features here is the color, so I can do all my different color grading. If you don't see it up in one of these windows, it could be over on the left hand side, it could be in the center somewhere, but if you don't see it, you can go up to the Windows taskbar here and then just make sure that this one is checked. If it's not, you'll see it disappear from this area. So make sure it's checked and then search around for it and you'll find it. So we want to make sure we're highlighting the video clip that we want to color grade. So I'm going to highlight this one. And the first thing that I usually do is just press auto and just see what the program does for me. And this is actually great because there you go. I just clicked it. And this is the before and after. So there's a huge change actually that just auto did, and it did it for the better. Sometimes it doesn't always do it the way you want it, and I have a few examples in here that kind of go sideways and will we'll talk about how to correct for that. But already I really like this clip. Okay, there are a few other things that we can go ahead and change on this. If we go down into our creative, we can add some sharpening. Again, you don't want to add too much, but you could see how it really brings out some of the details. So we're going to add a little bit of sharpening and maybe some vibrance. Then we have our curves panel here. And a lot of the times I like to brighten it up a little bit and then bring down the shadows. And this gives us that little S curve there. If we toggle this on and off, it really bumps up the brightness and the contrast. Now, let's say if I wanted those blues to be a little bit more punchy, I'll just take my little eyedropper here and then go to the blues, and then I can just crank them up like that. That looks a lot better. Now the curves here, if you're just beginning, you might want to just play around with some of these sliders. For the most part, I like to do maybe a little bit of an S curve if it's asking for a little bit of a brightness bump, some contrast. And then sometimes with the colors, I'll just enhance them a little bit by grabbing that little eyedropper there and then bringing up the color. And then we'll go down to color wheel. I really enjoy using the color wheel. This is where my midtones I like to warm up. Maybe add a little bit of red in there. And then I might brighten up a tiny bit. And then the shadows, I love to really cool down the shadows and then darken them. Highlights, you can give it a little bit of bump of color too. If it's calling for a little bit more yellow, that looks nice. And then vignetting. If my video is stationary and not moving around, I might add a bit of vignetting to my video. And I'll always make sure to feather. The feather just goes all the way up so that it's not this harsh oval or circle. And then my midtones, I like to bring in the vignetting. Well, depending on it, I'll slide this around and see what it looks like. And then the amount too, I'll also, adjust that accordingly. Okay, so with just those changes right there, we go from a raw here to a super punchy and colorful video. And this might be a little too extreme here with that S curve. So we're gonna take this a little bit back. There we go. That looks a little bit better. And right there, we've drastically changed the video. Now, the original was taken with a polarizer while I was filming. This next clip was without a polarizer. So this goes to show you how important it is in the field to try and get the best video quality possible so that you're not just trying to, make something work afterwards by doing tons of different adjustments. So let's go ahead and see what auto does first with this video file. And already that's a huge change. It looks a lot sharper, way more color, but not as much color as I would want. So let's go down to the curves here, add a little bit of sharpening and some vibrance. Maybe we'll even bring up the saturation a tiny bit. That looks good. I might even go down to my color wheel here and then just add a lot of warmth to the midtones. Maybe brighten it up a little bit, and then the shadows, I'm going to really drag those down and then add some blues. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Maybe it's too blue. There we go. The highlights, let's bring up the highlights a little bit. Right there. Play around with the midtones. Maybe the midtones need to come down, the highlights need to go up. So even if we toggle this on and off, the color wheel, that is a huge difference right there. So let's take a look at those two clips. There we are for the normal. So much more pop, so much more color. Okay, moving on to the next one. This is a barred owl right here. And down by its talons here on this branch, everything looks a little washed out. Now the reason why I wanted this clip is because there's a lot of snow in here, and I'm curious what the auto will do. Will it brighten it up? Will it leave it the same? Pretty much left it the same, but added some contrast. Actually, it brought up the highlights a little bit in the sliders here. And we can go a little bit brighter. Let's bring up the exposure a tiny bit and then maybe bring down the highlights. And then we might bring up the shadows, but crush the blacks a tiny bit. Now I do like the color here. It's looking pretty good. I might bring the vibrance up a tiny bit more, add some sharpening to it. And already that looks pretty good from before and after. Just having it brighter there is so nice. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, here's our next one where I've got a hummingbird feeding her young, and there is a lot of color here. So we're just gonna go back to the basics, hit auto. So it didn't do a whole huge change here. So if you turn that on and off, if anything, it made the subject darker. And that's because of the surrounding elements here. The leaves and the branches and the bush here are quite bright. And I think it's taking away from the subject here. So we might want to go right down to vignetting and like control a little bit of the surrounding area. Add some feathering. Oh, here, add some feathering. And then we can go back up to basics here, sort of brighten it all back up again. Even the shadows. If we bring up the shadows, it goes a little flat, which is why it's important to make sure that, you know, contrast either comes up, maybe the blacks come down a little bit to just bring back some of the contrast that got washed out. Even right there, that looks pretty good. We'll bring up the sharpening, some vibrance. Now, these are global adjustments. Say if you wanted to really be specific on the hummingbird here, we could apply another color adjustment to this video and just have it be specific onto the hummingbird and the nest. And how you would do that is you would open up an effects controls panel, and this just shows us the video right now and what's going on. Right now we have color adjustments, which is what I have that I'm doing right now. And we can see some of the effects and stuff that are turned on here. But we can drag and drop that effect again into this video clip. So if we go up to effects, click into effects here, and just type in color. So here we go, we have our effects here that we're already working on. And if you drag and drop this into this video footage here, you can see now we have two. We have our global one, which is right here. This is doing it to the entirety of this video clip. And then we have one that we can control that is isolated. So if we pick the circle here and we just drag it to where we want it, and then we even feather it out, there we go. We can go down into all of our same sliders. Here we got basic, correction. We got basic, creative, curves, color wheel, everything we've been talking about that's over in this panel right here. So now what we can do is we can go into basic control, and what do we want to do? We want to bring up the exposure. Woo, that's way too much. Bring up the exposure a little bit. Maybe we want to add some contrast. Maybe we want to add some more color. Look at that. Woo, that's nice. Maybe the temperature needs to be warmer. Maybe it needs to be cooler. I don't like any of those. So let's go to the original, super flat, and this is our adjustment here. Okay, I want to stop for a second and let you know that you can always invert some of these adjustments. So if you are clicking on like the circle there to select your subject, there's a little box there you can check and it will invert that so you work on everything that's outside of the circle. So I wanted to make sure that you knew about that. Another thing is you can purchase or get free LUTs online. A lot of other videographers love to sell their own LUTs, And basically it's their own, you know, formula of sliders and all the different things that they did to color grade a certain way. And they package it and give it to you so you can just drag and drop it onto your video. Okay, and the last thing is that my cameras are set up for their video profile to retain as much information as possible to work in post-processing. And a lot of those profiles are very flat. Some of them are called like D-Log, I think, for my drone. So you want to make sure that your camera is set up to get the most information in the field without the camera body adding all of its different secret sauces to your video profile. So instead of your camera doing it, you can do it here. So make sure to go ahead and check about your camera. I do have a whole other video about setting up, say, like your Z9 for capturing video out in the field. So I'll leave a little marker at the end of this video if you want to check that out. But yeah, all of these video clips that I'm editing are very flat profile. That's why they look so dull, and we need to bring them back to life in post-processing. So let's get back into the video. Our next one here, which is the bear. Okay, we're gonna go back to the original here. And I got this bear here where I hit the auto, and the auto did a pretty good job. It brought out some color, some contrast. I like the brightness, it's pretty good. But I think there's more that we can do here. The vibrance and the sharpening. But if I go down to, say, my color wheel, we're gonna warm it up a tiny bit. In the midtones, add more blue, teal into the shadows. It gives us that color contrast, but it's still not at all what I want to see, because that color of water right there was way more saturated in real life. The color of the minerals and stuff coming down through that glacier water was unreal. And the bear's face as well, there was a lot more color in the browns. So I'm just gonna brighten that up a tiny bit. Add some color to it and make sure that the teal color is looking pretty good. Yeah, that looks a lot better. So here's the before and after, and I like the way that looks. Okay, now what if you did a video recording that wasn't raw and your white balance was off? So this is a video clip of a bunch of seabirds that are grabbing a ton of fish. There's a big bait ball here. You can see all the fish in their mouths. And we're gonna see what auto can do. So if we hit auto here, auto did a terrible job. Now it warmed it up, it added some magenta, and it brought the saturation way down. But I don't like that at all. If we look at the original, super blue, but now it's kind of washed out in gray, and I lost a lot of the color in this video. So we're gonna hit reset here, and I'm gonna take this little eyedropper for the white balance, and we're gonna select one of the seagulls' heads, because seagulls, you know, heads are white. So if I click something that's neutral, some white there, it should have a perfect balance of warmth and color tones in there, which it did a fantastic job. Now, another thing that the auto didn't do is really balance out the photo as far as exposure. It's actually still quite dark when it should be quite bright out. It's sunny, it's like midday, and I video recorded this, you know, where the exposure was balanced, which doesn't mean it's correct, because the seagulls actually should be quite bright, and something that's white reflecting the sun should be really quite bright. So I've retained all the information, but now I need to give it that extra bump of realistic exposure that we would see, because they should be quite bright. So this is where I'm actually going to bring up the exposure, but I might bring down the highlights, so I'm not blowing out any of the highlights. I might bring up the shadows a little bit, but I'm going to crush the darks, maybe bring up some contrast. And right there, that looks a lot better. There's the original, and that looks a lot nicer. Now, the water here, I could add a little bit of vibrance, which will also bring it to their beaks here. And then in the curves, if I really wanted to add some colors to the yellows, I could bump up their yellows here and see how that looks. Oh yeah, that looks a lot nicer. So again, this is the original, and this is after just a few adjustments here. I wouldn't put any vignetting on here just because everything should look the same as far as exposure from left to right in that body of water. It shouldn't be getting darker on the sides. Yeah, so we're gonna move on to the next clip. This is a wolf taken when it was cloudy. It's very flat light. Let's see what auto can do. Beautiful, that does look really good. I'm gonna up the sharpness, maybe add a little bit more vibrance. I just love color, you know? And I think it always needs it because my Z9, when I'm shooting it flat, it's quite flat. There's not a whole lot of color there. Now the warmth here in the fur, I'm gonna bring up a bit more of the warmth there, the browns. That looks quite nice. Okay, let's go to color wheel here. This is where I'm gonna add some warmth, and then blues for the shadows here. Yeah, that looks a lot better. So this is where I might want to add another adjustment to here that's very specific, almost like a gradient, so I darken the foreground. So if I zoom out a tiny bit with this video here, I go to my effects, and I could just pick the color one if I wanted to, but I might just do brightness and contrast. So if I type in BRI for brightness, you'll see brightness and contrast come up. I'm going to drag and drop right here. And this is when I'm going to add the pen tool here. And then I'm just going to go directly across like that. Here I got my little square here. And then I can feather either on the slider here on the left-hand side, or I can just pull up on this tab here to feather it out. And this is where I'm going to take the contrast, slide it up a tiny bit, and then lower the brightness. And then just see how that looks. I need to... So let's see what the original looks like, and we can go back into fit. So this is the before and this is the after. So these adjustments might be a little extreme. I might walk away from the computer, I might come back, might tone things down, but all in all, it looks pretty good. Okay, now we're gonna talk about tracking. Okay, the last clip that I got here is a wolf kind of walking down the beach. If we press play here. And what about if I wanted to add an adjustment just to the wolf's, body or head, brightening him up, not the rest of the scene, and then track it as it's moving, because he's moving a little bit, here and there, and he's bouncing. So I did some basic adjustments already, but I'm gonna grab this right here, which is the brightness and contrast right here in my effects. And I'm going to drag and drop it over here into the effects control of this video clip. Now, if I press the oval, the square, I can get the pen tool and I can make my own shapes. But we're just going to use the oval here. And I'm just going to move that to where I like it. Then I'm going to add some brightness to that adjustment, maybe some contrast. So I'm going to go back to the very start, put that into position right there. Then we want to go to our mask path. So each movement that the wolf makes, I can actually manually track this adjustment right here. So at the very beginning, I could pull it down into place, hit the little toggle animation icon right here, hit click, move a little bit further in the clip, move it up into position, and you can see that it just made another marker here. Then I can move it along. That looks good. Oh, it's a little bit off. Move it this way. And then, so as I move it along, I can manually adjust it, but that can take a lot of time. And since the wolf is just bounding down the beach in a fairly straight line, I could just let the program go ahead and read the movement of the wolf and do it automatically. And I can just press this little play button right here. It says track select mast forward. So if I press this little play button, you can see that it's starting to track it. All right, there you go. Take a look. As the wolf's going down, you can see that adjustment that's bright, and I can still brighten it up. Like even if I go crazy just for this viewing, you could see that it just tracks the wolf all the way along down the beach. Well, if this video was helpful, please give me that thumbs up, and if you aren't subscribed, think about subscribing. If you haven't set up your camera to be able to capture video out in the field, perhaps you'd be interested in this video right here. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you on the next episode. Ciao.